In a quiet shelter, night after night, a tiny French bulldog puppy cried endlessly, his soft whimpers echoing through the dark halls. Volunteers tried to comfort him, but nothing seemed to ease his pain. Then, one evening, a stranger walked in, and what happened next would leave everyone speechless. This is not just a story about rescue, but about hope, compassion, and the power of a single choice that can change a life forever. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss more inspiring stories like this one. The Cedar Grove Animal Shelter always fell quiet after 10 p.m. Fluorescent lights dimmed to a hum, mop water drying in pale streaks on concrete, a soda machine blinking like a lonely lighthouse in the lobby. But in Kennel 14, the silence never held. A tiny French bulldog puppy with a bat-eared silhouette pressed his nose to the bars and released a soft, aching cry that slipped under doors and around corners like fog. The staff called him Echo, because his whimpers seemed to bounce off every wall long after he stopped to breathe. Echo's ribs rose and fell too fast. His paws, pale as seashells, kneaded the blanket the volunteers had folded 3 times over to keep the concrete chill away. He licked the rim of the stainless bowl, searching for comfort where there was none, then lifted his head to sing again, thin, quavering notes that made even the vending machine seem to listen. Near midnight, the glass front doors whispered open. A woman stepped through, shoulders slumped under navy scrubs and a rain-speckled parka. Maya Bennett, charge nurse at St. Agnes ER, had left a 12-hour shift with the kind of empty that a hot shower couldn't fix. She'd come to the shelter for what she told herself was 10 minutes of dog therapy before home. She'd promised the adoption counselor earlier that week she was just looking. No commitments. Her apartment lease was no pets, her student loans unforgiving, her life a careful stack of shifts and sleep. Then she heard it. One long, pleading cry from the back hallway. "Is he still going?" she asked the night attendant. A college kid named Evan who was picking at a granola bar like it was homework. "He starts around lights out," Evan said, apologetic. "Falls asleep from exhaustion, then wakes up and starts over. Nothing works. Toys, t-shirts with human scent, white noise machine. He winds himself up until he hiccups. It freaks the other dogs out." Maya stood perfectly still, an ER professional who could triage chaos in seconds, now undone by a sound. She followed it past snoring shepherds and curled-up terriers until she reached Kennel 14. Echo lifted his head. The moment their eyes met, his glossy and too wide, hers ringed in fatigue. His crying stuttered, then softened to a breathy whine. "Hey, little man," she whispered, crouching. "Rough night." He pressed himself so close to the gate his whiskers bent. His chest fluttered like a paper bag in wind. She recognized the rhythm. Panic tipping toward exhaustion. How many times had she coached a human patient through this same edge? "May I?" Maya asked. Evan hesitated. "We don't usually." "I'm a nurse," she said gently, already toeing off her shoes. "I'll sign whatever. He needs contact, not noise." 5 minutes, Evan said, unlocking the latch. What happened next made the security camera blink at a scene it had likely never recorded. Maya stepped inside the kennel, slid her parka down as a makeshift mat, and, without a second thought, lay on the concrete floor beside the trembling French bulldog. She turned her back to him, curled just enough to create a human crescent moon, and began to breathe slow and loud, counting each inhale like a metronome. 1, 2, 3, hold. 1, 2, 3, release. Echo sniffed the sleeve of her scrub top, circled in a wobble, and tucked himself against the curve of her stomach as if he'd been searching for that exact place all along. The shiver in his body thinned, then settled. His breathing synced with hers. Ragged at first, then steadier, then soft enough that Maya felt it as a warmth rather than a vibration. Tears pricked her eyes without permission. She'd steadied gunshot victims with her palms and coached strangers through terror. But this small life leaning into her as if she were a harbor, that undid her. Evan's voice floated from the doorway, hushed. I've never seen him stop." Maya didn't move. "Don't talk," she whispered, smiling through the ache in her neck. "Let him win this one." Minutes stretched. The vending machine blinked. Rain ticked the metal roof. Echo's paw, weightless as a leaf, drifted onto Maya's wrist and stayed. When his breath finally deepened into the little huffs of honest sleep, she exhaled a laugh so quiet it felt like a prayer. 5 minutes turned into 40. Evan returned with a blanket and draped it over Maya's shoulders without a word. He killed the hallway light. The shelter seemed to draw a softer breath. Around 1:10 a.m., Maya's phone buzzed. A text from her landlord sat on the lock screen. A reminder about the building's strict no-pets policy, complete with a bolded line, "Any violation results in immediate fees." She stared at it, thumb hovering, then turned the screen face down. Echo shifted, pressing closer. She knew what this looked like. Reckless, impractical, impulsive. But as Echo sighed into sleep for the first time in weeks, the math she'd done 1,000 times rearranged itself. Some costs you pay in dollars. Some you pay in regret. At 5:47 a.m., the fluorescent lights snapped on and a chorus of morning barks erupted. Echo startled, then, feeling her hand still on his chest, stayed calm. The day shift tech stopped mid-step at the sight of a nurse in socked feet and a French bulldog puppy sleeping like a stone. "Did you sleep here?" the tech asked, eyes wide. Maya pushed up on an elbow, hair a storm, smile unguarded. "He slept," she said simply. "That's what matters." She stood, joints protesting, and faced the adoption desk before courage could drain. "I'm filing the paperwork. Today. Whatever he needs, I'll figure it out." The tech blinked. "You do know about his medical notes? The breathing, the possible soft palate surgery, the costs." Maya glanced back at Echo, who had lifted his head and was watching her like sunrise. "I read every line," she said, "and I heard every cry." She slid her ID across the counter. "Start the process." From somewhere behind the lobby, a phone began to ring. A sound that would soon carry more complications than she could guess. But in that moment, with concrete chill in her bones and puppy warmth still lingering on her sleeve, Maya felt the strangest thing. Certainty. The adoption office at Cedar Grove Shelter smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. Stacks of manila folders towered on every surface, each one representing a story half-written, waiting for someone to turn the page. Maya Bennett sat in the narrow chair across from the intake counselor, her scrubs wrinkled, hair still damp from the shelter sink where she had splashed her face. In her lap, Echo, the French bulldog puppy who had cried every night until last, dozed in a tight ball, his tiny snores filling the silence like punctuation. "Miss Bennett," the counselor began, voice kind but cautious. "We're grateful you want to take Echo home, but before you sign, I want to be clear. This is not an easy adoption. He has brachycephalic airway syndrome, common in French bulldogs, but his case looks severe. There will be vet bills, possible surgery, regular checkups, and," she added, adjusting her glasses, "he'll need patience. A lot of it." Maya stroked the ridge of Echo's ear with her thumb. The puppy stirred but stayed curled in her lap, safe at last. "I'm an ER nurse," she said quietly. "Patience is part of my bloodstream." The counselor studied her, perhaps searching for cracks of hesitation. "I've seen people return dogs like Echo after a week. Too loud, too fragile, too costly. You should know that's why he was passed over 3 times. Maya looked down at Echo. His paw twitched as if he were running through dreams, his nose pressed against the fabric of her scrub pants. Something in her chest tightened, not in fear but in recognition. She'd spent years watching patients abandoned by families who couldn't handle the weight of care. The thought of Echo living that story again was unbearable. "I'm not returning him," she said, her voice steady. "Not ever." The counselor slid a stack of papers across the desk. "Then sign here, and here. Initial each page." The pen felt heavy, as if each stroke carved a promise into more than paper. When she wrote her name, it was with a clarity she hadn't felt in months. Echo shifted, letting out a soft sigh, and Maya smiled without realizing it. By the time the last page was signed, the shelter's morning bustle had started. Volunteers clattered food bowls down the hallway. A Labrador barked like an alarm clock, and the lobby filled with the smell of disinfectant and fresh kibble. Evan, the night attendant, leaned against the doorframe, eyes red from lack of sleep but full of awe. "You really did it," he said. "People always talk about maybe coming back. But you actually did." Maya pulled Echo closer. Talking doesn't help him. This does. The counselor gathered the papers into a neat stack. "Congratulations. He's officially yours. But Maya, one more thing. If he starts crying again, don't panic. It may happen. He'll need time to believe you won't leave." Maya nodded. She understood that better than most. Trust wasn't built in a night. It was layered, breath by breath, heartbeat by heartbeat. Outside, the sky was pale gray, the kind of morning that felt like the world had just exhaled. Maya opened the shelter door with Echo nestled in the crook of her arm. For the first time, the puppy didn't whimper. He blinked at the light, squinting, ears twitching at the chorus of car horns and distant sirens. "Welcome to the outside, Echo," Maya whispered. Her car, a dented Honda Civic parked crooked in the lot, suddenly looked smaller than it ever had. She adjusted Echo onto the passenger seat, layering her parka beneath him to soften the vinyl. He circled twice before settling, eyes fixed on her as if afraid she might vanish. As she drove, every bump in the road felt like a test. Echo whimpered once, then pressed his face into the jacket sleeve she draped across his seat. When Maya reached out at a red light, his paw found her wrist again, the same way he had in the kennel. By the time they reached her apartment complex, Maya's chest was a storm of emotions. Relief, fear, determination, and something else, something heavier than the no pets clause in her lease, heavier than her landlord's warnings. It was the sense that this decision had already rewritten her life, even before she unlocked the front door. Her neighbor, Mrs. Langley, spotted her in the hallway. "Maya, sweetheart, is that... Oh my goodness, a puppy." She bent closer, squinting. "That face. He looks delicate. Is he yours?" Maya hesitated only a moment. "Yes," she said firmly. "He's mine." Inside her apartment, she set Echo down gently on the floor. He waddled unsteadily, sniffing corners, then stopped and whimpered. Maya knelt, spreading her arms wide. "Come here, little one." Echo toddled toward her, collapsing against her legs. When she lifted him, he didn't resist. His head rested against her chest, breath fluttering like a bird's wing. And there, in her modest living room with rent overdue and bills stacked on the counter, Maya knew she had chosen something that might break her. But as Echo's tiny body relaxed against her heartbeat, she also knew some breaks were worth it. Maya had thought the hardest part was over when she carried Echo through the shelter doors, his papers signed and his future secured. But as the day slipped into night, reality crept in with the shadows. Her tiny apartment, with its scuffed floors and second-hand furniture, wasn't exactly the picture of stability. Bills piled on the counter, her landlord's warning still rang in her ears, and she couldn't ignore the faint worry that she had taken on more than she could handle. Echo had spent the afternoon exploring, sniffing table legs, batting at the fringe of the rug, and finally collapsing into a nap on the couch cushion Maya had placed on the floor for him. Each movement was clumsy, his little legs wobbling under his weight, but his determination was almost comical. Watching him stumble and recover again and again, Maya couldn't help but smile. But when the sun dipped below the horizon, the same heartbreaking pattern began. Echo whimpered, then he cried. It wasn't the sharp bark of a puppy demanding attention, but the long, broken sound of loneliness, the kind Maya remembered from the shelter. She crouched beside him, stroking his ears. "Sure, it's okay. You're safe now." Yet his cries only deepened, echoing through the tiny space. He pawed at the door, as if expecting someone to take him away again. Maya tried placing him in the bed she had made from an old laundry basket lined with blankets. He clawed at the sides until his tiny nails snagged on the fabric. She lifted him again, heart twisting. In the ER, Maya was trained to stay calm through chaos. Bleeding patients, alarms screaming, families sobbing. But here, With one fragile puppy trembling in her hands, she felt almost helpless. Finally, she set him on her bed. He hesitated, then pressed his small body against her side, tucking his nose under her arm. The crying stopped. Within minutes, he was asleep, his breaths shallow but steady. Maya lay awake longer, listening. Each sound from him, every sigh, every twitch, felt like a code she needed to decipher. Was he in pain? Was this normal? She searched her phone for information about French bulldogs and their health issues, her stomach sinking with every mention of airway problems, vet expenses, lifelong care. At 2 a.m., Echo stirred again. He didn't cry this time but stared at her with wide, glassy eyes, as though making sure she hadn't disappeared. Maya reached out and let him place his paw on her wrist. Only then did he close his eyes again. By dawn, exhaustion weighed on her like lead, but when Echo woke and scrambled clumsily onto her chest, his little tail wagging for the first time, Maya felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in months: hope. She carried him into the kitchen and opened the small bag of kibble the shelter had provided. Echo sniffed at the food, then ate with surprising enthusiasm, his tiny jaw crunching noisily. Maya laughed softly. Good boy. That's strength right there. But the moment of relief didn't last long. A knock rattled her door, sharp and impatient. Maya froze. Echo barked. A tiny, raspy sound that barely counted as a bark but made her heart swell. She opened the door to find Mr. Duffy, her landlord, arms crossed and eyebrows arched. Maya, he said, scanning past her into the apartment. You know the rules. No pets. Her stomach dropped. She instinctively stepped to block his view. Behind her, Echo let out a small whine. Mr. Duffy's eyes narrowed. What was that? Maya swallowed hard. She wanted to lie, but she also knew Echo's life depended on honesty and courage, the very things that had brought her here. It's a puppy. I adopted him yesterday. The landlord sighed heavily. I don't have to remind you. This is a violation of your lease. I could evict you. Maya's throat tightened, but she lifted her chin. Please, Mr. Duffy, just give me time. He's not just a dog, he's been through enough. I promise I'll keep the place clean. You won't even notice he's here. There was a long silence, broken only by Echo's faint breathing behind her. Mr. Duffy studied her face, perhaps searching for the same determination the counselor had looked for at the shelter. Finally, he shook his head. 1 month, he muttered. Prove you can handle it. If I hear complaints or see damage, he's gone, or you are. Maya exhaled in relief. Thank you. You won't regret it. When she shut the door, her knees almost gave way. Echo padded toward her, tail wagging, as if he understood the danger that had just passed. She scooped him up, holding him close. 1 month, she whispered. That's all we've got. We'll prove him wrong, Echo. You and me. That night had tested them both. Maya's resolve and Echo's trust. But as the puppy nestled into her arms, she realized something important. The crying might return. The challenges might grow. But she wasn't alone anymore. For the first time in a long time, neither of them was. The following week tested Maya in ways she hadn't expected. Life with Echo was beautiful, yes, but it was also relentless. The small apartment, once quiet and predictable, now echoed with the patter of tiny paws, the clink of a food bowl, and sometimes, in the middle of the night, that familiar sound of soft whimpers. Maya tried everything she could to comfort him. Toys, blankets, soothing words whispered in the dark. Some nights it worked. Others, Echo's cries would last for hours, leaving her sitting cross-legged on the floor, rubbing his back until dawn. The lack of sleep made her shifts at the hospital blur together. More than once, a fellow nurse nudged her when she nearly dozed off during rounds. Still, she refused to give up. Every morning, no matter how tired she was, Maya would take Echo outside to the small courtyard behind her building. The neighbors, most of them older tenants, would pause to watch. At first, they frowned, clearly disapproving of a rule-breaking dog in the complex. But when Echo, still wobbling on his stubby legs, wagged his tail at them, their expressions softened. He's stubborn, Maya explained once. laughing when Echo refused to follow her lead back inside. But maybe stubborn is what we both need right now. Despite the smiles, the pressure never left. She knew Mr. Duffy could appear at any time to check on her. She scrubbed the floors twice a week, vacuumed the couch daily, and kept air fresheners near the door. She couldn't afford mistakes. Then came the scare. It was late one evening when Maya noticed Echo breathing harder than usual. His small chest rose and fell quickly, each inhale sounding strained. She froze. French bulldogs were known for respiratory issues. She'd read about them endlessly. But now, it wasn't just words on a screen. It was happening right in front of her. "Echo?" she whispered, kneeling beside him. His eyes looked at her, trusting, but his tiny body trembled. Without thinking, Maya grabbed her bag, wrapped him in a towel, and rushed to the emergency vet. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and fear, a place she knew too well from her own work. She cradled Echo while the vet examined him. After what felt like hours, the vet finally spoke. "It's not life-threatening right now, but he's showing signs of brachycephalic airway syndrome, common for his breed. He'll need monitoring, maybe surgery down the line." The words hit Maya like a storm. Surgery, monitoring, costs she could barely imagine covering. She swallowed, her throat tight. "So what do I do now?" The vet smiled gently. "Take care of him, watch his breathing, limit stress, and remember he doesn't need perfection. He just needs you." Back home, Maya sat with Echo curled against her chest. He was calm again, his breathing steadier, but the fear lingered. She thought about her rent, her bills, and now vet expenses piling on top. Doubt crept in like a shadow. Maybe she wasn't enough. Maybe she had made a mistake. But then Echo lifted his head, pressing his wet nose against her chin. The simple gesture, so small, yet so full of trust, cut through her thoughts. She realized Echo wasn't asking for guarantees. He was asking for her presence, her courage, her love, and that she could give. The next morning, Maya walked into work with tired eyes but a steadier heart. During a break, she told her coworker Clara about Echo's night. Clara, usually reserved, surprised her with a smile. "You know, you sound different when you talk about him," Clara said. "Like, lighter, stronger. Maybe he's exactly what you needed." Maya thought about that all shift. She had taken Echo to save him, but maybe, just maybe, he was saving her too. That evening, she returned home to find Echo waiting at the door, tail wagging furiously. The sight pulled a laugh from her chest, the kind of laugh she hadn't heard from herself in years. She knelt, letting him leap clumsily into her arms. "Okay, little one," she whispered, kissing the top of his head. "We're in this together. No more doubts." The road ahead was uncertain. Rules to bend, money to find, health to manage. But as she sat on the floor with Echo curled against her, Maya knew one thing. She wasn't going to let fear decide their fate. That night, for the first time since bringing him home, Echo slept without crying. Maya had started to believe that things were finally settling. Echo was adjusting, their routines were smoother, and even Mr. Duffy hadn't shown up to deliver one of his infamous warnings. For the first time in weeks, Maya allowed herself to breathe. But peace has a way of shattering when you least expect it. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when Maya came home from her late shift. The building's hallways smelled faintly of bleach, the usual scent of Mr. Duffy's obsessive cleaning. As she climbed the last flight of stairs, she noticed something odd. A faint barking echoing through the hallway. Her stomach tightened. The sound was coming from her apartment. She unlocked the door and froze. Standing inside, holding Echo's leash with a sour expression, was none other than Mr. Duffy. Echo whined, tail wagging nervously, sensing Maya's tension. "You think I wouldn't find out?" Mr. Duffy snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Dogs are strictly forbidden here, and this one, he's been crying at night. Tenants complained. I warned you, Miss Alvarez." Maya's heart hammered in her chest. She stepped inside quickly, shutting the door. "Please, he's harmless. He doesn't bother anyone. I've been keeping everything clean, I promise. He's just a puppy." Mr. Duffy tugged the leash slightly, making Echo stumble. Maya's protective instinct flared. She crouched, gently lifting the French bulldog into her arms. Echo pressed against her chest, trembling. "You're breaking the rules," Mr. Duffy continued, his eyes narrowing. "And rules exist for a reason. Either he goes or you both do." Maya felt her throat tighten. She had fought so hard for Echo, for his safety, his health, his trust. The thought of him being sent back to the shelter, to cry alone in a cold cage, was unbearable. Her voice wavered but held steady. "I won't give him up." The silence stretched. Mr. Duffy's face darkened. His lips pressed thin. "Then I'll have no choice but to file for eviction. You'll be out by the end of the month." With that, he turned sharply, leaving Maya standing in the middle of her living room. Echo nestled in her arms, her entire world crumbling around her. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat at her small kitchen table, bills scattered across the surface, Echo curled at her feet. Every option felt impossible. Rent alone was a struggle. How could she manage eviction, deposits, moving fees? Yet she looked down at the little French bulldog gazing up at her with those trusting eyes, and she knew surrender wasn't an option. The next day at the hospital, exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders. Clara noticed immediately. "Rough night?" she asked. Maya explained everything in a whisper, her voice breaking as she spoke about eviction. Clara listened, her brows furrowing. When Maya finished, Clara said softly, "Maybe it's time you stop carrying this alone. Let people help." Maya almost laughed. Who could help her? She had no family nearby, no savings to fall back on. But Clara's words lingered, stirring something inside her. That evening, when she returned home, she found a small envelope taped to her door. Inside was a note written in neat handwriting. "We've all heard Echo. He's not a nuisance, he's a blessing. Don't let him go." Signed, Apartment 3B, 4A, 2C. The note was followed by several signatures from her neighbors. Maya pressed the paper to her chest, tears flooding her eyes. The very tenants she feared would complain were standing by her side. For the first time in days, hope flickered. Maybe she wasn't fighting alone. Still, she knew Mr. Duffy wouldn't back down easily. The battle was just beginning. But as she looked at Echo, who wagged his tail as if sensing her renewed strength, Maya whispered, "We're not giving up. Not now. Not ever." That night, as the rain tapped gently against the windows, Maya wrote down a plan. It was shaky, uncertain, but it was a plan. And in her heart, she knew. The fight for Echo wasn't just about saving him anymore. It was about proving that compassion could outlast cruelty. And she was ready. For weeks, Maya had lived in a whirlwind of tension, balancing her quiet work life at the small flower shop with the constant anxiety of what the landlord might do next. Max, her French bulldog puppy, had become the center of her days and the anchor of her nights. His once trembling body was now filled with energy. His once hollow eyes now shone with mischief and love. Yet, in the back of Maya's mind, the threat of losing him still loomed like a storm cloud. Every night, she replayed the moment when she first found him, crying in that shelter cage. The memory was both a source of strength and a reminder of how fragile his future remained. She had pulled him out of despair once, and she was determined never to let him return to it. Then, one afternoon, while Max was asleep in his favorite spot by the window, Maya received a phone call that nearly made her heart stop. The animal welfare officer who had visited weeks before was calling back. "Miss Carter," the calm voice said, "I wanted to update you. We've been monitoring the shelter where you adopted Max. After your complaint, we opened an investigation, and you were right to be concerned. Several cases of neglect have been confirmed. The shelter has been temporarily shut down, and charges are pending." Maya sat down, her hand trembling as she held the phone. She looked at Max, who stirred and raised his head as if sensing her emotions. Relief flooded her chest. At least one battle was being won. She whispered softly, "They can't hurt you anymore." But the officer wasn't finished. "We also reviewed your situation with the landlord. Given the circumstances and the evidence of his harassment, you have grounds to file a formal complaint. We can connect you with legal aid to make sure you and Max are protected. For the first time since bringing Max home, Maya felt the heavy chains around her heart begin to loosen. She wasn't alone. There were people willing to stand with her to defend not just her but Max as well. That evening, she took Max for a walk under a gentle drizzle. The city streets shimmered with reflections of streetlights, and Max trotted proudly beside her, his tiny paws splashing in puddles. He no longer cowered at sudden noises, no longer tucked his tail whenever someone passed by. He walked like he belonged, because Maya had given him a home. As they passed the park, a little girl pointed at Max and exclaimed, "Mommy, look at the happy puppy." Maya smiled and nodded. Max really was happy now, something she once feared might never be possible. Back at the apartment, she sat by her kitchen table, organizing papers the welfare officer had sent her. Max climbed onto her lap, resting his head against her chest. His breathing was steady, his body warm and secure. Maya kissed the top of his head and whispered, "You're safe now. We'll fight this together." That night, for the first time in months, Maya allowed herself to dream about the future. Not one filled with fear, but with hope. She imagined mornings in the park, watching Max chase butterflies. She imagined evenings with friends who adored him as much as she did. She even imagined moving one day, finding a bigger home where Max could run freely without worry. But most of all, she imagined peace. Peace in knowing that she had not only saved Max, but that Max had saved her in return. His cries had once broken her heart, but now his joyful barks filled the empty spaces of her soul. Still, the story wasn't over. The landlord had not given up, and a confrontation was coming. But Maya no longer felt powerless. With Max by her side, and with the backing of people who cared, she finally had the courage to stand tall. As Max curled up beside her that night, his little snores filling the quiet room, Maya looked out the window at the city lights and whispered to herself, "Tomorrow we fight, but tonight we rest in hope." The morning sun streamed through the thin curtains of Maya's apartment, casting a golden glow on the small living room where Max stretched lazily on the rug. It was the kind of calm that once felt impossible. Yet, as Maya prepared for the day, she knew a storm was brewing. The landlord had scheduled a final inspection, a last attempt to intimidate her into giving up her French bulldog puppy. But today, Maya wasn't afraid. Max sensed the tension in her movements. He patted over, nudging her leg with his warm nose as if to say, "We're in this together." Maya knelt down, cupping his face in her hands. "No matter what happens, you're my family now. I'll never let them take you from me." The knock on the door came sharp and impatient. The landlord stood outside, arms crossed, a sneer already forming on his face. "Miss Carter," he said curtly, "we've told you before, no dogs allowed. You're violating the lease. This animal needs to go." Maya straightened her shoulders, her voice steady. "This animal has a name. His name is Max, and I'm not giving him up." The landlord scoffed. "You don't have a choice." But before Maya could answer, another voice called from behind him. The animal welfare officer approached, clipboard in hand. "Actually, she does. We've reviewed her case. Given the circumstances, and the harassment she's endured, Miss Carter is fully within her rights to keep Max here until the lease ends. And if you continue this harassment, sir, legal action will follow." The landlord's face twisted in frustration, but he knew he was cornered. Without another word, he turned and stormed down the hall, muttering under his breath. Maya stood frozen for a moment, her heart pounding, until the officer placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing. You and Max deserve peace." When the door closed, Maya dropped to her knees, pulling Max into her arms. Tears streamed down her face. Not of fear this time, but of relief. Max licked her cheek, tail wagging furiously, as if he understood that they had one. That evening, Maya took Max to the park. The air smelled of fresh rain, and the grass sparkled under the setting sun. Families gathered, children laughed, and dogs chased after each other in bursts of joy. For the first time, Max ran freely, his little body bounding across the field, his bark echoing like a song of victory. Maya watched him, her heart swelling. This was more than survival, it was freedom. The puppy who once cried alone in a shelter cage was now surrounded by life, love, and hope. And the woman who once doubted her own strength now stood taller, her spirit fortified by loyalty in its purest form. As the sky turned shades of pink and orange, Max returned to her side, panting happily. Maya scooped him into her arms, holding him close as she whispered, "We made it, Max. We really made it." And in that moment, she realized something profound. Saving Max hadn't just been about rescuing a dog. It was about finding the courage to fight for love, to fight for family, and to fight for a better tomorrow. Their journey had been filled with tears, battles, and fear, but it ended in triumph. Together, they had written a story of resilience, one that proved even the smallest bark could echo louder than the harshest threats. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who believes in the power of loyalty and love. Stories like Max's remind us that courage can change everything, and that family is sometimes found in the most unexpected places.